incredibly hectic schedule. But before we get into that, you are the former mayor of down in Miami. Give me your thoughts on the Dolphins. Tua's got it rolling.
Yeah, look, we had our doubts about Tua. I mean, we still have, the health concerns. Obviously, he's never had really a full season where he's been completely healthy. But when he's there, man, his release is the fastest in the NFL right now. Yards per attempt. I think McDaniel, the coach, is a heck of a coach, a heck of an offensive mind. We have unbelievable weapons. They're bullets. And I like what the Dolphins are doing. So we're kind of excited in South Florida. Let's see if we can keep it up.
I got to ask you, the border crisis made headlines again yesterday with what looks to be, some people are calling it an invasion. Some people are calling it the worst crisis to face this country in a number of years. Two questions. One, how is it affecting the state of Florida that you represent? And the second question to me is, why do you feel like our border czar, Kamala Harris, and her boss, Joe Biden, won't do anything about it?
Well, what's it doing to Florida? Like every other state in the union, Florida, every state now is effectively a border state, even though the brunt is being felt by Texas and Arizona, New Mexico, and California, because they actually are border states. But all these migrants, the millions of migrants that are being allowed into this country, are being shipped all over. Look what's happening in New York. The mayor of New York is saying that this could actually, change what New York is about, can destroy New York. And heck, he's only dealing with, I think, about 100,000 migrants in that city. And so we've had more than 5 million people crossing into the United States. That's a bigger number than many states' population. And so, it's a huge financial burden. New York itself thinks it's going to cost $6 billion for those 150,000 migrants. So you can just multiply that out. I did the numbers, and if that's the case, if you had a X number of dollars per migrant that the taxpayer has to pay for, you're talking about close to $200 billion, and that the taxpayer is going to have to fund for all these services that these migrants are going to come in. They're not even getting their court date. Some of them don't even have a court date until 2033 or something like that. So completely out of control and completely avoidable in my estimation.
Why won't Biden do anything about it?
It's a great question, and we keep asking not only we keep asking the Secretary of Homeland Security, why don't they do something about it? And I believe that because they like what's going on. They actually want to have this open border. Look, it's pretty easy to solve. I mean, the first day that Joe Biden came in office, he terminated a number of Trump-era executive orders, issued his own executive orders. They obviously don't work if you're actually trying to control the border. If you actually want the border to be chaotic and a mess, then what he's doing is working just fine. But so he knows that what he did isn't working. Mayorkas knows that what they're doing isn't working. They just need to go back to the old policies to stop this flow. They refuse to do that. I think they're driven ideologically. I also think they're driven by forces on his left, part of his party, that want open borders, that want all this immigration to come into the United States. It's on purpose. It's not done by accident.
Why would you want that? Now, there is a town apparently in California that's going to allow folks coming here illegally to vote. Is that the end game here? What's the end game for allowing an open border, particularly when you know the cartels are driving it, Chinese are bringing folks, prisons are being emptied? What's the end game? Why would you want this?
The only thing that I could figure is that they're trying to, that somehow all these folks that are coming in right now will eventually become U.S. citizens and eventually vote for the Democrat Party. It's about the only thing that makes sense to me, which is really, when you really think about it, these migrants that are coming they're under incredible threat and danger. Many of them have died on the way to here. We've had record numbers of migrants' deaths on the Rio Grande and in those areas. We have migrant deaths on the way over here. I spent some time down in Panama in the Darien Gap, and saw, these migrants coming through that dense jungle, an incredibly dangerous journey. And I'm sure migrants are dying there. But if this is just for politics, it's really, really reprehensible. And the only thing that I can figure actually that it is for politics, that for some future date, they feel that most of these migrants will turn to be Democrat voters. I think their calculus is wrong. The Hispanic vote, most of these migrants are Hispanic. Hispanic vote is actually turning towards the GOP, to the Republican Party. So even if that's what they want, I don't think it's going to pan out. But that shouldn't be the reason why you have a wide open, chaotic border and our laws are being violated.
What's behind a possible government shutdown?
Well, the government shutdown, look, the fiscal years run from October 1st to September 30th. We don't have a final budget for next fiscal year. And if you don't have that, we haven't authorized it, we haven't appropriated the funds, then that causes a government shutdown of certain functions, not everything. And then our problem with the Republican caucus or the Republican conference is that we have some folks that are on we have people that are on the right, and then we have people that are center right, and we have some differences of opinion there. I would love to see a funding resolution that funds the government for another 30 days or so while we get all our appropriations done. Some of our members don't want to do that. They want to have, we have 12 different appropriation bills that have to be passed, and then that's sent on to the Senate, and then finally it has to be signed by the president. That takes a little bit of time. Today, hopefully, today and tomorrow, we get one of those done, which is defense, which, by the way, is about 70% of what's called discretionary spending, which is non-mandatory. And then we're going to be fighting over the other 30. I think we've reached a number. Now the question is procedure. Some of our members are just philosophically against a funding resolution, a continuing resolution. Hopefully we can get some of them to change their minds, pass a bunch of our appropriations bills, and we don't get it all done, finally pass some kind of funding resolution that kind of covers the gap until we can get everything done.
Yesterday, Merrick Garland was in front of oversight committee, and a lady from Indianapolis, Victoria Sparks, who I love, really went at him, and she made the comment very loudly and very boisterously and very well that Americans are afraid of their own government. Now, you came, from Cuba, where people were legitimately afraid. Is that a claim? Is that claimed by Ms. Sparks? Is that legit?
I think some Americans are afraid of their government. I'm not saying all Americans are, but I think some Americans are. I mean, look, the way that some Americans and they feel that the government, especially the DOJ and the FBI, have been weaponized. When, as a parent, you go in front of a school board and you voice dissent with what the school board is doing, then somehow you're labeled a terrorist. That's not the America I grew up in. When you have a Department of Justice that seems to have two kinds of justice, or how justice is served. If you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're the president's son, you're treated a certain way. When you're the president of the United States, former president, you're treated another way. So there are a lot of Americans that are saying, hey, there's something going on here. This is not what America is about. This is not what the Justice Department is supposed to be. This is not what the FBI is supposed to be doing. And so some of them, are afraid of their own government. Look, we should never be afraid to speak out. We have our First Amendment rights, and because some folks just don't follow the orthodoxy or what is deemed to be politically correct, that you're somehow a threat to America or democracy. That's not the America that I grew up in. That's not the America that my parents brought me here for.
Hunter Biden, last thing before I let you go, and thank you for your time, sir. Hunter Biden, another guy, Congressman from Indiana, Todd Young, said, there may be some smoke here, but there's not any real fire when talking about Hunter Biden. I don't know. I've had journalists on that broke the story. I have one journalist that has the hard drive in her apartment. She's telling me there's a lot of smoke there. Why would anybody think there's not any fire there, only smoke?
Yeah, because actually, what if there's fire in Hunter Biden, that fire extends all the way to Joe Biden, his father. That's the reason why they're trying to cover this all up. There is plenty of smoke here. I mean, it's not just a little puff. This is smoke rolling out of your windows. And take it from a former firefighter, because I'm a former firefighter. When there's smoke,
Right.
there's fire. And so, yeah, there is plenty of smoke here. There's millions of dollars that have been funneled into the Biden family, including his grandchildren. We don't know what the Biden family does for all these millions and millions of dollars that have been funneled to them. Uh, the Democrats seem to think that somehow, if somehow we can't prove that this money found its way to Joe Biden, the president, that somehow everything's okay. I just don't think that Joe Biden, when he's asking, and look, for me, there's plenty of evidence here to say that we need to look further into what's happening. I believe that the president may be compromised by hostile powers, and if that's the case, we need to perform and follow our constitutional duty and look into these allegations, this evidence that points in a certain direction. And if in fact it's found out that yeah, Joe Biden and Hunter Biden were involved in influence peddling, bribery schemes, et cetera, I just don't think that Joe Biden would tell somebody, "Hey, look, here's my bank account number. Why don't you pay me into my bank account number? All right, I'll have that money for me." I'm sure he's a lot brighter than that, and that there are ways to try to hide them. And look, there was a 1023 form that we've seen, that was a highly placed FBI informant that said that they spoke to the chief executive of Burisma, who said that individual said that he paid $5 million to Joe Biden and to his son Hunter, and that it would take years for anybody to figure out how it was done, because they use all of these shell companies, et cetera, to kind of move money around. So, yeah, I think that we need to investigate it. I think there's plenty of plenty of smoke here, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of fire behind that smoke.
Last thing is at what point is the United States obligation financially to the Ukraine over? Like, at what point is the checkbook, I don't know, closed?
Well, look, there's a misnomer that somehow we're writing checks to Ukraine. Most of the money that's coming from the United States is actually from munitions, weapons, stuff that the Ukrainians themselves are using to fight the Russians. And so there's no blank check here. Do we feel that the Russians should be stopped in Ukraine, and should we be providing the weapons for the Ukrainians to fight the war themselves? Yeah, I'm in that camp. Okay, I'm not a fan of the Russian government. Remember, I came from Cuba, and the Russian government helped keep my people, still is helping keep the Cuban people under the yoke of communism. And so I'm not a big fan of the Russian government, and I also am not a big fan of aggression against a sovereign nation. And so when a nation decides that they want to fight that bully themselves, not have any Americans over there fighting that, yeah, they need a little help with munitions and guns and tanks, planes and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm kind of okay with that.
So you're telling me that when they announced that we're giving another X number of billions, that's not the way it is? It's more in equipment?
Yeah, it's the value of the munitions and the weapons and the missiles and the planes and the tanks that we send them. That's the value of that. Very little of that is actual money. So, I mean, that's a misnomer here. A lot of people say, "Oh, we're sending all these billions of dollars and we don't know how they're spending it, and they could be corrupt and they could be pocketing and all that." Yeah, unless somebody's pocketing a 155 millimeter shell in their pocket. Okay, yeah, all right. But most of it, and I've seen it firsthand. All the equipment that's gone over there, and how it's all cataloged and a price is attached to it, and so that most of it is in munitions and weapons and missiles and all that. It's not in cash, and so I think a lot of people don't understand exactly when we say the billions, most of it is actually in weapons.
Yeah, I'm glad you cleared that up because I was in that camp. I just read, hey, look, we're going to send X number of billions over. And I'm like, well, wait, I don't want to pay tax for that. And I understand what you're saying about the regime. What's going to ultimately happen? Two things. What's going to ultimately happen, in your opinion, with Hunter Biden, and what's ultimately going to happen with the conflict Russia-Ukraine?
Look, with Hunter Biden, I think he's going to be. I really don't know. Look, you're presumed innocent until you have your trial. He's been indicted, and so he's going to have a trial. This is on weapons charges, but really, there's some other charges that he should have been charged with, which is tax evasion, and the DOJ, on purpose dragged their feet so that the statute of limitations was exceeded, so that he can't be charged for some of the stuff. We know that by fact, we already know that he evaded taxes on $2 million in income. You and I, if we had evaded taxes on $2 million in income, would have been facing some jail time, but he didn't. Again, that's proof again why people are saying, hey, well, there's a two-tier level of justice here in the United States. Hopefully, we'll see some of those tax charges or some, not registering as a foreign agent. Those are also against the law. We'll see what the DOJ brings up to that. Look, at the end of the day, it's not Hunter Biden that's the issue for the American people. It's Joe Biden. He's the president of the United States. That's the real issue. If, in fact, the president of the United States is compromised by foreign adversaries, we have a major problem here in the United States. That's what we need to uncover. That's why we will continue with our inquiry, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. And then what's going to happen? If, in fact, the president is guilty of some of these issues that he's been either accused of or indicated he may have been involved in, then hopefully he will be impeached and removed from office. And if he's not, then his name will be cleared. One way or the other, the American people have the right to know.
It's going to happen in Ukraine, ultimately.
I think ultimately the Ukrainians are going to withstand the Russian army. It looks like the Russian army may have been a paper tiger. And we also here have to keep, look, I'm a student of history. I liken what's happening in Ukraine to what happened in 1938 with Nazi Germany and Czechoslovakia, and then eventually Poland, which led to a war. At this point, I think we need to stop the aggression of the Russians. I think the Ukrainians are doing a great job at doing that. And remember, the Russians and the Chinese kept supplying arms to the North Vietnamese for over a decade. And eventually, the United States had to pull out. And so the Russians and the Chinese didn't supply, as far as we know, fighting men and women. They supplied them with arms. And eventually the North Vietnamese were able to prevail in that war against the biggest military power in the world. So I don't think it's beyond the pale, or I think it's a reasonable assumption that the Ukrainians can do the same thing against the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is nowhere near as powerful as the United States was.
I can't thank you enough for coming on. This has been interesting as heck. Sir, thanks a lot. I know you're busy. I know you got bigger priorities, but thank you so much for taking 15 minutes with us.
No, I appreciate it, man. So it was a good conversation, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, I hope you'll join us again. I'd love to have you back. That was great. Thank you, sir. That was great.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. I love when I get educated by people. Like, I'm like you. I'm sitting here watching it. I think it's a blank check. And here's a guy. I always trust the guys that are in it. And I know somebody on Twitter or somebody somewhere is going to say, well, we pay for it. Okay, whatever. I love the fact that somebody's actually there. I tell you this all the time. There's always a backstory. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
One of the good things that's happened is that we have seen that our defense industrial complex, right, is lacking. And because as we've been dishing out this new munitions and arms, et cetera, we say, well, wait a minute, we're depleting our reserves. We're using stuff that we produced back in the Korean War. All right, now we got to redo it. We now have to replenish our supplies for ourselves. And we're finding that, hey, for too long. In a lot of these weapon systems, we've allowed that defense industry to decay to the point that they're not building that. So now we have to restock ourselves. It will cost us that amount of money to restock ourselves. So I'm not saying it doesn't cost money because we have to restock what we just gave out, but we don't give money. We give most of them. We give munitions and the value of those munitions. And so, like Stinger missiles, we hadn't produced Stinger missiles here since the 90s. All right, 20, 30 years ago. Well, we have new technology. Maybe we should be producing new Stinger missiles, okay, for ourselves, and we need to buy those in order to replace the ones that we've given to Ukraine. And by the way, the stuff that we're going to be giving to Taiwan also to make sure that they don't get invaded by China in the near future. So all of that costs money, but it's not hard money. I mean, it's stuff. It's not money. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna. Since you came back on, how do you react to this? Patrick Harrington, who's a pretty bright guy, you get to know different people by doing a show. He said, "I wish you'd ask the congressman who pays to replace the American arsenal of munitions. The American taxpayer. That's who. Is the congressman playing a shell game with you?"
No, I just explained it to you. Okay, obviously, right?
Right.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but the angst of most people, all right, I believe is that they believe it was a check, a money, and that somehow the Ukrainians were pocketing the money, okay, of the American taxpayer. That was the angst. That's what I get. I've never, I just explained to you, yeah, we're going to have to replace the stuff that we give them. We're going to have to replace it, and that costs money. Absolutely. That's the value of the stuff we have to replace. And the American taxpayer will be doing that. But in retrospect, there is a silver lining in that, hey, we have allowed our defense industry to kind of wither at the vine. And this has actually shown us that we've allowed that to happen, that we can't do that anymore. We have a much bigger adversary looming on the horizon, which is China. And we need to get prepared for that. When we need new weapon systems, we need new shells, et cetera, and that we're going to be buying. We need to buy them, and yes, the American taxpayer is going to be footing that bill.
I say you're in favor of it because of your life experiences, and people are going to criticize that. But I always say, there's 350 million people here. Not everybody's going to think alike, and everybody has to make their own decisions and have their own thoughts based on their experiences. And boy, oh boy, does that piss people off when your experiences doesn't agree with theirs.
Look, like I said, do we have to fight aggression? The one good thing about this, is that the Ukrainians are the ones shedding their blood. The Ukrainians are fighting that war. It's not Americans that are fighting the war. We're not in Iraq. We're not in Afghanistan, where we actually were fighting the war. This is different. And so I would much rather give the armaments, the weapons to a country that's trying to defend itself than to send American troops in to defend that country. At least you got to give Ukraine credit for that. Okay. And so, for that, yeah, I'll be willing to send them some arms and munitions so that they can defend themselves.
Again, based on your experiences, being in Cuba and understanding the regime that they're fighting. Again, thanks. I appreciate you hopping back in here and clearing that up because I knew that was coming. I knew, and I should have asked you that before, but you cleared that up very well, and I thank you for that.
Okay, thanks. No, I don't play a shell game. I'll tell you what, how it is. Yeah, it costs money at the end, but it's not. Yeah, it's money here. The money's going to be spent here. All right. The shell, the munitions are going to be sent over there. Okay.
Please come back.
I will. All right. Have a great one.
You too. That was a good time right there. We got next time.